The gospel reading today is from Luke 15, verses 1 through 10, found on page 78 in the Newer Testament section of the Pew Bible. I'm actually going to be reading from the Common English Bible. Allison has sort of put me onto that Bible, and I have thought that I like the way it feels, and I'm sort of trying to become comfortable with it. I like the way it sounds. Verse 1. All the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and the legal experts were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus told them this parable. Suppose someone among you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't he leave the other 99 in the pasture and search for the lost one until he finds it? And when he finds it, he is thrilled and places it on his shoulders. When he arrives home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Celebrate with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who changes his both heart and life than over 99 righteous people who have no need to change their hearts and lives. Or what woman, if she owns 10 silver coins and loses one of them, won't light a lamp and sweep the house, searching her home carefully until she finds it? When she finds it, she calls together her friends and neighbors and saying, "Celebrate with me, because I've found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, joy breaks out in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who changes both hearts and life. May the Lord bless this reading of the gospel, the reading of our scriptures. In a little bit, we will sing it. We're singing a number of songs that sound that you may be, if you've been around the church for a long time, you may be very familiar with. If you're sort of new to the church, then some of these songs you may not know them. But one of those songs that we will sing in a little bit is "Amazing Grace." And Amazing Grace has a long history. It was written by John Newton, who was a captain of a slave ship, and who had this conversion experience, and a life-changing experience. And he coined the words, or he penned the words, "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." Pertinent words, because he was indeed he was lost to God, and he was also literally becoming blind. So he understood, that those words sort of were very pertinent and powerful to him, the words as he wrote them down. My own experience has been that lostness is not something that happens once and then I get over it. There are times when I continue to be lost, or I continue to find myself sort of lost, and I have to, and again and again, God, like the shepherd, sort of goes out and brings me home again. Sometimes we think about that, and when we think about that, when we think of who is lost, we think about these people that come to our mind that are definitely away from the fold. There's a tendency that Christians have sometimes to sort of point out there, and to have this sense of and even as they go about their day, to think about who is in and who is out, who is saved and who is lost. But I think that the when I read this passage, I realize that Jesus actually gave 3 stories, and we're looking at 2 of them. He also gave the story of the lost son. But the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son all belonged. All of them had a place. All of them were lost from a fellowship or a community or from a place of where they were supposed to be. So I was thinking about, what does it mean to be lost? It's a lot I lose things all the time. I have a cycle of lost and found in my house. I know, and those of you that never experienced this or rarely experience this, you would simply say to me, if you'll just put your keys in the same place every day, they will be there. I don't know why. When I come in, I usually drop my keys in my wallet and sometimes my phone on the closest plateau. That seems there. And then when it's time to leave, if I remember that I don't have them, I look for them, and I can't remember which plateau I left them on. Were they on the bookcase, on the desk, on the dining room table? Where did I leave the keys, and where did I leave my wallet, and where did I leave my phone? As I was leaving this morning, my wife Helen was saying, do you have your hearing aid? Do you have your phone? Do you have your keys? And do you have your wallet? And so do you experience that? Yeah, what are the things you lose? What are the things that you're maybe saying to your roommates or your friends every so often? Have you seen mine? And you fill in the blank. Have you seen mine? And now some people don't have that problem. Some people put things in the same place every time. I know they do that. It's a discipline, and but there's many of us that we lose things. And when I lose something, sometimes I get desperate. I feel desperation, particularly if it's my wallet, because then I'm thinking, maybe I didn't make it home with my wallet. Maybe it's on the table at the restaurant. Maybe it fell out of my purple bag that I carry things in. Maybe I lost it. And then when I find the wallet, I feel like celebrating. I feel like and the degree of celebration that I feel has to do with the worth of the thing that's lost to me and how desperate I feel without it. So Jesus in this parable, in this story, in this chapter, and I really like this chapter. This may be my favorite chapter. I like it for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that it tells us so much about the setting. It tells us what Jesus is doing. It tells us, who is around him. It tells us the comments of those people around him, and it tells us how Jesus responds. All of those things are there in the parable. And then as Jesus tells the parables, he sort of unpacks the parables for us. He does, like sometimes I read a parable and I think, I'm not sure what this means. And the disciples around him were like that also, the ones who walked every day with him. They would say the same kind of thing. Well, could you explain this to us a little bit? But this one is very clear, isn't it? Jesus is talking and spending time with, and even eating meals with people who are outside the circle, that are outside this circle of God's, that some would say was the circle of God's love. And so Jesus was spending time with this bunch. Now, I don't know, when I read Scripture, I try to think, okay, what's the equivalent? What is the equivalent for me? Who would it be? Who would it be that that would be out, that I would see as outside the circle? And would I be critical? Am I critical? And would I go outside the circle to be and be seen with possibly be identified with those that are outside the circle? So Jesus is it's almost like there's this fear that who you eat with sort of rubs off on you, and so eating is this almost sacred thing that you do. And I have seen, I know when there's an opportunity to go out to eat, or if you're one to go out to eat, then the tendency, or my tendency, is to try to find somebody that will go with me to eat, so that I'm not eating alone. But I don't want just anybody to go with me. There are people that might invite me to eat that I might not want to go eat with. And so it was in Jesus' day. And this group that any respectable religious person would reject as an eating partner these were the people that Jesus was hanging with. These were the people that Jesus was eating with. And these were the people that were more and more being drawn to Jesus. The Bible describes them as tax collectors and sinners. Well, who were tax collectors? We read that and it goes right by us, and we think, oh yeah, well, I might like a tax collector. If I were a tax collector. A tax collector was someone who worked for an oppressive government. Rome controlled Palestine, and Palestine was, and they actually sort of auctioned off, or not auctioned off, but gave to the highest bidder there was these jobs of collecting the taxes. And these people that are called tax collectors worked for an oppressive government, and they were allowed to charge whatever they could charge in order to make as much as they wanted to make. They were both hated and feared by the average person because they had power. They had power, and they were ostracized. They were alone. I was thinking, these were political enemies of those who were considered themselves to be religious. These were people who were a part of the oppression. And I don't have anybody exactly in that category, but then I did think, and this is sort of hard, I did think, it's maybe in my case, it's the people who are in different places with me politically. We live in a very divided world, and divided, there's the division, our country is very polarized. And what I have seen is that the polarization over politics has divided families and divided communities and divided churches and I wondered if those, and probably on either end of the polarity, there is a circle of inclusion. I'm wondering if the tax collectors in my life would be those that I disagree with. That would be on the other end, if that would be the equivalent. Sinners were people that had just sort of, I think it had just sort of thrown up their hands and said, I can't play the religious game, and I'm not going to. It's too hard. It's too hard for me to get in. It's too hard for me to make out. And maybe some of them had professions that made it more difficult. They were doing things that the religious rituals, that there were religious rituals for cleansing. They were doing things that were hard to clean. They were just outside. They'd been outside for a long time, maybe. And so these were also the people that Jesus was hanging with. And So Jesus told these two parables. One was about a shepherd who lost sheep, and he had 100 and he lost one sheep out of 100, and went back out to find it. Now he asked the question, who wouldn't go out? If you were a shepherd, wouldn't you do this? And probably the answer was, no, not really. Would I go out for one sheep when I've got 100 that still need me? Yeah, but would I go out for one? And Jesus was saying, and Jesus, as he told the story came down to the punchline. Then then the punchline was shepherds like God, and God is concerned about the one that's out there, that's away, and not in the circle. And so, and God was, and yes, God would go out, and when God and invite that one in, or in this picture, pick up the sheep and carry the one in. And when the one is found, there's great celebration. Now, as people were listening to the story, they were probably listening for the punchline. They were listening for the meaning of the story. And they were probably beginning to say, ask the question, who are these people? Who are the sheep? Who is the shepherd? And Jesus made it very plain. The shepherd was like God, and as the shepherd would celebrate the one sheep that was saved and found again, God celebrates the one that's out there. That's where God's focus is. And then we had the story of the woman, same similar story. 10 coins, one lost coin. Again, I sometimes we go through this major house cleaning, not because we want to clean the house, but because we've lost something. We're doing this. We're doing this major project. Helen would kill me if she were here to say this. But we have this major trying to find, particularly if it's a paper, if it's one item, one paper, one thing we need. So we search the house and look for it, and when we find it, there's a great celebration. I think and then so it becomes, again, it becomes obvious that the woman represents God, and that the coin and the lost coin represents those that are outside the circle, and that the woman's concern is that the woman has a great concern for finding that which is lost. And then there's this great celebration in heaven over the one that's lost, the coin that's lost, over the person that's lost and brought back in. And in the story, we know that there's a third story of the lost son, which I've already preached on a few weeks ago, or a month ago. So, okay, I have found that I really like the writings of Debbie Thomas. And so I was looking at what she had to say about this passage, and she said that the thing that she has discovered is something that I sort of began with, is that lostness can occur again and again. I don't know did you hear it in the scriptures that we read before I read the gospel? When Joseph led us in the reading of the psalm, the psalmist is saying, "Cleanse me." The psalmist is feeling outside the circle, and the psalmist is saying, "God, give me a way to come in. Cleanse me. I'm alienated. I'm not where where you want me to be, and where I ought to be." And then in the gospel, in the epistle reading that Aaron shared, the writer is saying, "Gosh, I'm just the worst. I was the worst, and I was alienated. I was outside the circle. But God, in the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, I was able to come in." These were people, particularly the psalmist. The psalmist was not a person that was not a lost person that had never been in. but was one who had been in and found himself out again. Now, there are things that keep us, that sort of push us out from time to time. Some of us get lost very close to home, and sort of within the very walls of the church. We get lost and this is, I'm sharing from Debbie Thomas. We get lost when prayer turns to dust in our mouth, when the scriptures we once loved lie dead on the page, when sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning makes our skin crawl, when even the most well-intentional sermons sucks the oxygen out of our lungs, when the table of bread and wine that once nourished us now leaves us hungry, cranky, bewildered, or bored. We get lost. We get so miserably lost that the shepherd has to wander through the craggy wilderness to find us. To get so wholly lost, we get so wholly lost that the housewife has to light her lamp, pick up her broom, and sweep out every nook and cranny of every house to discover what's become of us. For the record, these versions of lostness aren't trivial. Notice that the searching in these parables is not a show. The shepherd isn't just pretending to look for the lost. The woman isn't just putting on an act with her lamp and broom. But what's lost is really, truly lost, even though the seeker is God. This is that God, I can't easily imagine God as a foolishly loved, hungry shepherd leaving the 99 behind to crawl through the bushes and clamber over ledges to search of one. I can barely conceive of God as a housewife bent over her broom, poking into the dusty cobweb corners, perhaps, hoping to spot a silvery glimmer in the shadows. I struggle to conceive of God as one who seeks the small, the seemingly insignificant, the hard to find, the just plain difficult. Maybe the most scandalous aspect of these lost and found parables is not that I still get lost. Maybe what's most scandalous is what they reveal about the nature of God. God the searcher, the seeker, the determined, the dogged finder. If Jesus' parables are true, then God doesn't hang out where I assume he does. If Jesus' parables are true, then God isn't in the fold with the 99 insiders. God insists it isn't curled up on the couch polishing the 9 coins she's already sure of. God is where the lost things are. God is where lostness reigns. God is the darkness and the wilderness. God is in the remotest corners of the house. God is where the search is at the fiercest. Meaning, I want to find God. If I want to find God, I have to seek the lost. I have to get lost. I have to leave the safety of the inside and venture out. I have to recognize my own lostness and consent to be found. This isn't easy, not by a long shot. For one thing, it's so hard for me to believe that I am worth looking for, that I'm not expendable, that I'm loved enough and desired enough to warrant a long, hard, diligent search. It's so hard to trust that God won't give me up on me, that God does God's work when I'm utterly lost and unable to find myself, that God will feel so much joy at my recovery that he'll tell the whole world the good news and throw us all a party. Today, I don't know where we all are. Maybe you've wandered in and you're here, but there are parts of you that are lost, and that keep you somewhere else. I guess the thing that I just want to underline for us all is that God sees you as worthy of the search. And that God invites you to come into the circle. And the circle is made bigger and different by your presence. By your presence, the circle becomes like you also. Your gifts help break the circle, shape the circle. And your cares and experiences help to define what the circle is to look like. Now, the circle is not just this church. The circle is the people of God everywhere. It's the relationship with God everywhere. So today, these few words just speak to me as a reminder that God's love for me is good and strong and is, in a way, scandalous. Because there's a part of me that wonders, sometimes, am I worth this kind of love? If you've had a week where you've been beat down a bit and you're wondering about your worth, know that God is saying to us all today that you are worth it. God has been with you in the midst of that struggle and will be with you in the midst of the struggle this week. And God celebrates every time we choose to turn from the lostness into the presence of the one who loves us.